We interrupt this incredibly awesome music to bring you some incredibly awesome political talk on Damn Radio.
Hello, good evening, welcome. I am hoping that you can hear me properly. JR, if you would endeavor to send me a text if it's not coming in right. It's been a while since I came in remotely. It all looks right on the meters, I believe, but we want to make sure that it's all okay and that everything is going the way it's supposed to. And I think it is, but can't tell for sure. At any rate, hello, good evening, welcome. Very glad to be here tonight. Lots of news and events in the world. And if you haven't been keeping track, there's plenty of discussion about the old Trumpster's 28-point peace plan. And there's also some information, the center of gravity. Here you go. The world can go on without the United States, according to Mark Carney. Oh, shouldn't we all be just very happy that Mark Carney is speaking about us in such a manner? He's a very well-spoken individual. Washington should not overestimate its role in the international arena, says Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. He adds that a wide range of issues could be resolved without U.S. involvement. The economic center of gravity, says he, is shifting away from America, he told journalists on the sidelines of the G20 summit over the weekend, where the big three presidents, Trumpster, Putin, Xi Jinping, did not show up. But we got to hear from Mr. Carney from Canada. That's important. The U.S. skipped the meeting held in Johannesburg, South Africa. President Trump accused that country, South Africa, of perpetrating genocide against white farmers. And he said that's why he isn't going. Washington also said that only a chairman's summary could be released following the summit because the U.S. was not present. So the G20 issued a declaration on Sunday anyway. The meeting brought together nations representing 3/4 of the world's population, 2/3 of the global GDP, and 3/4 of the world's trade. And that's without the United States formally attending, said Carney on Sunday. It should be, and he said it is, a reminder that the center of gravity in the global economy is shifting. Well, I tend to agree with him in that, in some respects, in that we need to play better with others. But I also think it's kind of rich coming from Carney. So according to the Prime Minister, decisions reached by the G20 members during the meeting could still carry some weight despite the U.S. boycott. He said that Canada is seeking to strengthen its ties with a variety of nations, including, according to the genius Carney, including South Africa, India, and China. So Russia sent a presidential representative, Maxim Oreshkin, who led the Moscow delegation at the summit and said it was a success. He added that his team had a lot of constructive communication with friendly nations and even received some proposals on economic cooperation and joint projects from unfriendly countries as well. So South African President Cyril Ramaphosa stated that ahead of the summit, the G20 is moving forward and will not be bullied. And he added that the U.S. decision to boycott the meeting was their own loss. So that, I suppose, is the top important news, huh? You think that's important, the G20 meeting? Or should we go back to my favorite, which has all kinds of world news involved. Everybody around the world is interested in this. There's been commentary all over YouTube and everywhere else. You know what I wanted to say, and I forgot to? Remember how I usually say I am coming to you live from the real estate of the art studio? I'm coming to you live tonight from the parking lot of the Staybridge Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee, on my way to Florida, going to Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday, and going to be down there. So I'm back to broadcasting on the road, hoping that the sound is coming through in a reasonably good fashion. It appears to be on the meter, so we shall see if JR has said anything about it. Nope, he hasn't. Probably not listening. Let us all have a single tear roll down our cheeks because JR isn't listening to my show. Then again, he might be. Only text will tell. Well, I wanted to go into all of the talk has been about these meetings at the G20, these talks that are going to be held in Geneva, and I'm wondering why they're so intent on this being Geneva. I don't understand that at all, but that is where it's going to be. They're being held in Geneva, and so it's Ukrainian officials. I hear that the team that's showing up in Geneva for the U.S. It's the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are meeting with the Ukrainian delegation in Geneva as President Trump's deadline looms. Well, Trump said today that even though Kiev was only given until Thursday to accept his 28-point plan, which we spoke quite a bit about on Thursday evening in my prior program, all 28 points laid out, that he could be, according to the Washington Post today, that he could be a little flexible on whether they're going to accept it or not. By the way, if you do wish to call in, you still should be able to, 573-746-8020, as long as I can get the as long as I can connect you, and I'm pretty sure I can connect you if you chose to call. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It matters if you call. I will try to get to it, and it does matter. I do like to have callers on the show, and I do like to speak with them. But the deadline is allegedly Thanksgiving Day. This Thursday is the deadline for the Z Monster to accept the plan. Now, Europe is all up in arms and say that they can't live with the U.S. getting all of the money from Russia's frozen assets. Ukraine, of course, is somewhat up in arms, but even the Washington Post acknowledged that the reason that this plan is looming large is and Trump, what did he say last week? He was out either in the White House or headed toward Air Force One or to his helicopter, whichever it was. He was on his way somewhere, and you know how the gaggle always grabs him and tries to get him to answer a question. They said, what's going to happen if Zelensky doesn't accept? And he said, well, he can just keep fighting his little heart out and let him keep on fighting. But allegedly, according to the Post, that the plan calls for terminating at that point money, but more importantly, money and arms, but more importantly, terminating United States providing military intelligence. That would be a big deal if the U.S. stopped providing intelligence to Ukraine. Frankly, I think they should have been cut off a long time ago. And the Post said today that basically they think that the fact that Kiev, that Ukraine is losing their ass on the battlefield, is finally getting people to Trump, especially, to make a move. And the statement on a couple of programs on YouTube and on some news that I've been listening to have been that if Trump pulls this off, he is officially the greatest negotiator in history. And the reason for that is because he will be getting a victory, not for Russia, not for Ukraine, certainly. Ukraine will be losing their asses. Russia will be losing $300 billion in assets and, and some other things as well. But the U.S. wins huge, because we don't lose anything. Europe gets nothing. They're completely forgotten. And I can see that as a potential. I can understand the argument that it's a big victory for the United States. But I also think it stops the bleeding for Ukraine. But they also get, a lot of Russia's money that Trump gets to push into Ukraine. But even bigger than that, much bigger than the money, much bigger than all that, is there was an economist, United States economist professor that was a guy in the Reagan administration that stated today that he estimates that $360 billion have gone to Ukraine. It's just in the last 3 years. And we're not talking the billions that went from 2014 until 2022, 8 years of nobody paying attention and all kinds of Ukrainians getting wealthy, because that money does tend to trickle down, to use a famous Reaganism. And so there are tons of people that benefited from that. But just since 2022, $360 billion from various countries around the world. And the estimate is that 15 to 20% of that went in the pockets of corrupt actors all over the globe, not just in Ukraine. So that's not counting the corrupt US people, that isn't counting the corrupt Europeans, and that doesn't even begin to address the corrupt Ukrainians, which is literally at least 20%, in my opinion, of the money that comes in. And you can't trust the 360 billion either, because if they say it's only 360 billion, it's probably been 500 to 600 billion, because they never tell the truth on how much money is going in there either. And so the fact is, there are some huge amounts of money that we are talking about here, and it's probably there's a lot of money that's been stolen. And so the Europeans are all up in arms, and they don't want to lose out on this other 300 billion that Russia has sitting around. And who's going to get it? America, or 50% of the profits on top of that. And the Europeans aren't even addressed. So this plan, according to many, the deadline was until Thursday to accept the plan. But Trump has said just over the weekend that, we're not going to hold him to this solid deadline. But this sudden submission of this 28-point plan by leaking it somewhere, it weakens Zelensky a lot, because basically he's being told that he has to accept it. And they released an alleged draft of the text, and it triggered turmoil everywhere. Kiev's European backers are scrambling, and Western media is calling their reaction an emergency response. Tensions are high. Concern is growing over Zelensky's ongoing corruption scandals. While the Kremlin is refusing to engage in what it calls megaphone diplomacy, and that's following a series of vocal declarations of defiance from Brussels on Friday. European Council President Antonio Costa admitted that the EU hadn't even been informed about the plan. And Zelensky held an emergency call with Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, and Friedrich Merz. And those three did a little bit of a presser while on the in South Africa at the G20. They all got together and did a little TV blurb about how they didn't think this should be done without the involvement of Europe, and Europe not getting any of the $300 billion of Russian money that is sitting around out there. And there was the news part that said so the various discussions over this. Where did they start? Because they've been trying to keep updating the timeline, and what they put in here, and this to me is troubling. It's not as troubling as the Hunter Biden involvement in Ukraine, but this is still troubling. And this came out at 11 p.m. Russian time, so this would have been about 4 p.m. Missouri time, okay? And so about 4 p.m. it came out that Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is part of the U.S. delegation in Geneva. And there's a photo of him at the meeting. And Kushner is believed to have played a key role in U.S. diplomacy in the Middle East as well, and elsewhere as well. But I don't know. I don't really like that nepotism sort of thing. I just don't like it. And then a little bit later, maybe 20, 30 minutes after that, said a member of the Ukrainian delegation actually broke his pen, snapped it in half, in other words, during talks with the U.S. delegation. Basically, they're being told they got to accept or else. And that's probably just BS. That's probably just, it broke, but it does look broken. Somebody actually took a picture of it. But that'd have to be somebody leaking it because there's no press in there. Nobody's in there. And so I don't know. There was also something, and I hope JR gets into this in his show tomorrow because I'll be listening if he is. And I want to hear about what he knows about this, or if he knows anything new. So there was the article that came out today that says Trump's Doge doesn't exist anymore at all. I thought it still existed, but it was just not public anymore, and that Elon Musk wasn't a part of it. But I don't know. Maybe JR knows, or he's talked about it before, and I've just missed it. But the story is that the Department of Energy and Government Efficiency has disbanded 8 months ahead of when it was supposed to end. Donald Trump launched the agency with a hell of a lot of publicity after taking office in January, and said it would be a sweeping effort to slash federal waste, bureaucracy. He tapped Elon Musk to be the czar of it. And the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, the government's human resources office, has taken over many of Doge's functions, said Reuters. When asked about Doge's status, Director Scott Cooper said that doesn't exist any longer. The agency is no longer a centralized entity, said the news outlet. And key Doge employees have reportedly been absorbed into other sections of the U.S. government. And the Trump administration has not admitted that the agency has been disbanded ahead of its decreed termination in July of next year. However, the president has long switched to referring to Doge in the past tense, according to Reuters. Suspicion about the agency's future began in June when there was a feud between Musk and Trump and his big, beautiful bill and blah, blah, blah. And at this stage, the agency is facing legal pushback against its efforts. In September, AP said the White House had moved to rehire hundreds of federal employees it let go during the push. So right back to business as usual. Who can tell? We don't know if that's true or not, but it's certainly irritating to me that these things get started and don't finish. Meanwhile, the White House is seeking to freeze billions in foreign aid. I hope this comes out. Donald Trump has asked the Supreme Court to freeze $4.9 billion in foreign assistance. Move follows a ruling last week by District Judge Amir Ali, who said the administration cannot withhold billions of aid that Congress already approved. But under the Constitution, only Congress can decide how money is spent, and the executive branch is required to carry out these appropriations. So, Solicitor General John Sawyer filed an emergency application with the Supreme Court Monday, warning that Ali's ruling raises a grave and urgent threat to the separation of powers. Trump asked Congress to cancel the $4.9 billion, which it was appropriated for State Department and U.S. Agency for International Development foreign assistance. And I think there was a ruling by Alito, but I can't find it. I thought I read that Alito had overturned that decision, but I haven't been able to find the article, and I can't remember where I read it. But don't hold me to that because I haven't seen it. But since the escalation in Ukraine in 2022, the U.S. has sent billions to Kyiv, most of it through U.S. Agency for International Development, and Trump and other U.S. officials claim that large portions were lost according to mismanagement and corruption and did not ever reach the intended recipients. So USAID is allegedly still shut down, saying it's got radical lunatics and blah, blah, blah. And who knows where it ended up. I think that money was gone and that it was that is officially gone. But there you go. Here's one for you that I am quite interested in, and I don't like this anyway. Nearly 200,000 Ukrainians might lose the right to stay in the U.S. Now, this is more just, I don't know what you would call it, public whip or media whipping up the public, in my opinion. But the article says 200,000 Ukrainians could lose their status because of Washington's border security crackdown. The humanitarian Ukrainian refugee program, U4U plan, was launched shortly after February 2022, and it allowed about 260,000 Ukrainians to enter the country for an initial 2-year period. President Trump paused the processing of applications and renewals early this year as part of a broader freeze on nationality-based humanitarian programs. But in March, Trump said he was considering revoking Ukrainian legal status entirely, but did not do so. In May, processing renewals was resumed, but immigration officials processed only 1,900 renewal applications for Ukrainians and other nationalities since then, representing a fraction of those with expiring status. Meanwhile, those waiting for decisions on getting an extension can be detained by immigration authorities once the status expires. So across Europe, public and political support for hosting Ukrainians is definitely declining. Not a lot of people are interested in this anymore. And in August, Germany, which has over, get this number, folks, Germany has over 1.25 million Ukrainian refugees. They announced plans to reduce the welfare payments those Ukrainians are receiving because they can't sustain it in their budget. So Polish officials recently said the same thing. And they're talking about the scale of the support given all this freebies to Ukrainians. And President Karol Nawrocki suggested this month that preferential treatment for them could end as well. And in the UK, authorities have increasingly denied long-term protection and working visas for Ukrainians, saying that western regions of Ukraine are now safe, so go back home. Several million Ukrainians fled the country over the last 3 years. 4.4 million have received temporary protection in the EU. So get this, Russia says that 5.5 million Ukrainians have arrived in Russia by the end of 2023. And there's 2 more years after that. I haven't seen any recent numbers on what that is either. But many have left not only because of the conflict, but because of mobilization practices and this confrontation between draft officers and the beatings that they're taking and all of that. That is a huge number. Russia has taken more than Europe. 5.5 million of them have applied for Russian passports. So on a personal note, I know that in Florida, where I live in Florida, there are tons and tons of Ukrainians. And there's a lot of Ukrainians that come over and left because they were Russian in Ukraine. And not just Ukraine, but they had Ukrainian passports, but they were Russians because that's where their families were when the Soviet Union collapsed. But they're all Russian, they speak Russian, they're Russian Orthodox, all of this, and they came here. But since they have Ukrainian passports, some of them cannot go back to Russia. And so when they try to go to Russia, they face all kinds of questions about that. And you can't have a dual Russian Ukrainian. I mean, you can, but it's hard to do. And so a lot of people are fearful of going back to Ukraine to get mobilized, but they're in fear of going to Russia because then they fear being somewhat targeted. I don't think it's really that big a deal in Russia. I think there's a hell of a lot more that go there because they don't like what's going on in Ukraine and they don't want to be mobilized, but they all have relatives in Russia. And so I don't know. It's a tough issue. And this war needs to be done and America needs to be out of it. But there's a guy, an ambassador named Alexander Darchaev, okay? The indefinite postponement of the Russian-American summit, remember that one, which was supposed to take place in Budapest, which was discussed after the meeting with Alaska between Trump and Putin. And there was a later second meeting at the White House when the old Z monster showed up. So the Russian ambassador to the U.S. is Alexander Darchaev. And so he was being interviewed. And one of the questions was, Donald Trump claimed that the U.S. will conduct nuclear tests very soon. Now remember, I'm very much interested in this in this topic because of my past. But the question is, how will this affect Russian-American relations and strategic stability? Moscow's initiatives to extend the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START, has with a prolonged pause in response, and that expires February 5 of 2026. So here's Darchayev's response. The situation is a paradox. The American administration has still not provided an official explanation requested by the Russian Foreign Ministry as to whether the U.S. president is referring to live tests involving detonations of nuclear warheads or, which would effectively bury the arms control regime that the Americans themselves have destroyed, or the test of new delivery systems. This leaves a lot of room for speculation and insinuation. If the Americans argue that they need to carefully analyze the Russian initiative in order to maintain the limits established by the New START treaty for 1 year after its expiration, a process can be completed quickly and without negotiation, then creating uncertainty around this issue of international security and strategic stability does not contribute to mutual trust and casts doubt on the American side's responsible approach. But it is worth noting that the potential resumption of nuclear testing in the U.S. has drawn sharp criticism not only from Donald Trump's political opponents, but from experts in the professional community who warn of serious negative consequences surrounding such a move. Claims that Russia and China, remember when Trump said that both Russia and China were conducting nuclear tests? They aren't, but he claimed they were. That they're testing nuclear weapons and that America must follow suit are completely unfounded. That's true. Such reversals by the current administration are driven by the desire to ensure U.S. military superiority. In Moscow, however, they are viewed calmly in the light of the breakthrough models of the latest weapons developed in recent years, which provide reliable security for our country. He's talking about Russia. We've always been willing to engage in honest and equal dialogue on this vitally important issue while strictly observing Russia's national interests. However, it is important to recognize that the conditions for dialogue will only be met when we observe positive changes in Washington's policy towards Russia. Well, I say that it is getting a little more positive with what is going on recently. As far as Russia and with Trump. I believe that Russia is holding the upper hand once again as far as talks with the United States, as opposed to Ukraine being, forced into something. I'm not sure how this will end. And there's been a decent amount of talk on the Russian side about how the 28-point plan might not be all it's cracked up to be, but at least they've said they could work with it. You know what I mean? That they could. That's a good starting point. And it's really Russia gains almost all of the Donbass. They have all of Donetsk. I'm sorry, they have all of Lugansk and most of Donetsk, and they want to create the rest, turn the rest of it, which is about 15-20% of Donetsk, maybe 10 to 15, more like it. That would turn into a buffer zone that Russia would have to withdraw from, and it would be demilitarized. And they're talking that an actual wall would be built around there. No, I'm not for walls, frankly. I'm for border security, but I'm not for walls. So I don't know. I don't know how that turns out. Anyway, there was another question for the ambassador, Alexander Darchaev, and it was the stalled negotiation process and Trump's cancellation of the proposed summit in Budapest indicate that Washington has backed off the Ukrainian issue. Can we say that positive momentum of the Anchorage summit has been expired? And Darchaev says, so this is what got me interested. Darchaev says, not at all. The significance of the personal meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, now back in the White House, lies in the fact that the two leaders negotiate on equal terms and try to find common ground. This is interesting coming from the Russian ambassador. So, and I think he's being pretty straight up about it. So just because the dialogue is stalled does not mean it has stopped. Contacts at various levels continue, and this requires patience and persistence. Well, I think Russia has been very patient. At the same time, of course, one cannot ignore the pressure that is exerted by the deep state. Imagine an ambassador talking about the deep state and its representatives in power who oppose Donald Trump. They, the deep state, are pushing the president to increase its pressure on Moscow, which is futile, in order to force the Russians to immediately cease hostilities and save Zelensky's regime. Furthermore, the fundamental principles of Trumpism, America first and peace through strength, imply the necessity of robust negotiation to eliminate accumulated irritants, rather than relying on personal chemistry that has developed between the leaders. However, bumps and pitfalls of such a disillusioned dialogue, which I reiterate, is taking place outside of the public's eye and away from channels exposed in the media, should not distract from the main point. As great powers, Russia and the United States are doomed to agree on at least a non-confrontational coexistence. This has been understood by Soviet and American leaders when they established diplomatic relations in 1933. Following Donald Trump's inauguration, the presidents of our countries also recognized this when they agreed in a telephone call on February 12th that they would seek to normalize the Russian-American agenda. I'm impatient for this myself. That's the end of his answer, by the way. But I'm impatient for this. I know there's been talks about it, but I haven't seen as much movement as I would like to see. And that is a little frustrating to me. And it was apparently to the person, because the question follow-up was this: what is the current status of consultations on your irritants in the bilateral relations? These were initiated by the previous administrations and the irritants, he means, which is the war, and given the new circumstances, were intended to facilitate swift removal of existing bans and restrictions on operations of diplomatic missions from both countries. This has not yet happened. Furthermore, the conditions for issuing visas to Russians have become more stringent. Why? Well, it's not all that easy to get a visa to get to Russia either. That I got to tell you, it's not all that easy. It's somewhat difficult to do so. It's so I've done it 4 times since 2020, and several times before that, but that was back in the 90s, and it was usually done by somebody else instead of me. I didn't really have to go there. But to get a Russian visa as an American isn't all that simple either. And so one time I had to drive from Missouri all the way to Washington, D.C. to go to the consulate, which is, in Washington, D.C. It's on the Virginia side. I forget where, but it's maybe 20 minutes outside of D.C. proper, right? And you go to the consulate, which is in a neighborhood. It's not near the embassy at all. And you go to this consulate, and it's literally a 4-hour, 5-hour wait to try to get in, and you have to have an appointment days in advance to get in, and that's not easy to create. So it takes you a while to create the appointment to get in. And that was in DC. So then I had to get another one, and that one I tried to get, and it said it was easier for me to go from Missouri to Houston. So I went all the way to Houston. There it was a tiny bit easier, but it was still a pain in the rear end. And they went through the documents. It wasn't as full. There weren't as many people, and we got it done. Now, you pay your certain amount, whatever the fee is to get your visa, $175, something like that. You got to have your photos specific and the way they do it. It's similar to a U.S. passport sort of thing. But the Russian sizes are all different. And so the Russian sizes are different. The paper sizes are different. You know, you don't have 8.5, 11. You have like A10 paper that you got to print everything on and all that stuff. Anyway, and you have to send in your passport with it to get this done. So you send your passport in several weeks before. So you're without a passport, and your passport is located in the Russian consulate in Houston or in DC, wherever you go. Well, I did that. And then so the first time taking my trip and driving to Washington, D.C. from Missouri, I mean, what does that cost you? You get a hotel for 2 nights, you drive, and I like to drive, or you can fly and do whatever. I can't remember. I think I flew to Houston, but I can't remember. And I think I flew down there because, big airport right there. And but either way, what do you got? A $200-300 airline ticket, hotel for a night, and the fee for buying your visa. Well, in Florida, did I get that in Florida? Nope, I was still in Missouri when I got this. So the last time I got a visa, and this current visa that I have expires like in April of next year, and I want to go one more time before it expires. But this time, I got all the paperwork together. I found a Russian visa process expert, speaks Russian, a Russian-speaking person, a Russian who's connected with this government somehow that was in Miami, and paid, I can't remember, it was some ungodly amount of money, but by the time you don't have to drive, you don't have to get a hotel, you don't have to be gone for 3 days. It costs like $750, but they pretty much guaranteed your success. They said you will have a visa, and it will be a 3-year visa. I was like, really? They said, yeah, if you don't get it, we give your money back. I was like, oh, well, that sounds reasonable to me. So I paid the money, sent in my passport. You still had to send your passport and all the stuff, and you ship it off, and off it goes, and you get your passport back 3 weeks later, something like that. It all comes in the mail. It's all well documented, and you send it in, but you get it back, and the visa is put in your passport, because your picture's got to be on it. It's got to be and now there's a little bit of way to get the paperwork before you go, but I don't know if any of you travel, and it's interesting. You have to have visas in a lot of places. As an American, it's less number than in other places. Like Russians have to go through this to get to America. They have to go through this to get to Europe. They have to go through this to get to a number of countries. And the U.S. has one of the least restrictive passports around. But I think I did a show on this several weeks ago that said we were in the bottom. Well, we were no longer in the top 10. We're like number 12 or 13 or something in our passport that you can go places without a visa, and they charge you. But it changes all the time too. Like the first time I went to Turkey, you had to get online and get a visa. First time I went to Australia, you had to get online and get a visa. and pay the money, to register before you get on the plane because it needs to be sent to you, and it's all an electronic process and you get it done. So I wanted to know about these visa processes, and they're talking about these bilateral deals that the countries have been making, and it came up when they were talking about the irritants. And so this question by this interviewer to Darchayev about the irritants, these are some of the irritants, and his answer went as follows after this interviewer followed up on the irritant part of the deal. He said, the dialogue on irritants has been ongoing and certain improvements have been achieved to date. However, these do not change the restrictive system imposed by Joe Biden, because Biden didn't talk to anybody for 3.5 years. They merely mitigate his most objectionable aspects. For example, the notification regime for diplomatic mission staff traveling outside 25-mile free movement zone has been relaxed. Previously, permission had to be obtained for each instance of crossing the zone, but now permission is only required for travel outside of the agreed quota. Now, relaxations within the quota have been introduced for business and for tourism travel. You correctly note that the issuance of regular visas are citizens who the Americans serving in Moscow, they don't serve them in Moscow, shut down the consulate due to lack of personnel because we pulled everybody back. And so there are no operating consulates in Moscow or in Russia at all. And you only have the embassy, and the embassy was severely limited. So Russians can't get visas. It's very difficult. So he says they're now limited to consular sections of embassies in Astana and Warsaw, where a Schengen visa is required. So a Schengen visa is a visa that allows a foreigner to go all over Europe. And so Russians have to have them, Ukrainians have to have them, but they've limited that when they become the EU, and certainly when Russia went. So there's a lot of visa-free travel for Ukrainians in Europe, but it used to be that Ukrainians and Russians had to have Schengen visas, which cover all of Europe, right? And so now for a Russian to get an American visa, before they used to be able to go to the American consulate in Moscow, and there were a couple other ones, and I forget the cities they were in, but there were several inside of Russia where Russians could go. But now they can't, and the embassy didn't do them. They were curtailed, and so these embassies are now authorized to take Russian visa seekers in the U.S. embassies in Astana and Warsaw, Poland. But the Russian people can't get to Warsaw, which is an EU nation. They can't get there without a Schengen visa. So they have to get a Schengen visa first and then a U.S. visa, and that doubles the length of time they got to wait. So he's just pointing that out. It says, at the same time, the situation with diplomatic and service visas has improved a little bit. This is somewhat given the mass expulsion of Russian diplomatic staff that was initiated by Washington under the Biden years, followed by retaliatory measures, which ultimately led to a shortage of personnel on both sides. Because after the U.S. expelled a bunch of Russians, the Russians expelled a bunch of the United States. Incidentally, despite the smaller staffs, the working regime of depleted consular offices did not change. During the aforementioned consultations on these irritants, the parties agreed to ensure uninterrupted banking services for diplomats. They committed not to block financial transactions with appropriate exemptions from sanctions. This is the primary concern of the United States, who was sanctioning everybody, right? But progress stalled in this regard because they have failed to address the root cause of the abnormal state of bilateral relations, which hinder the normalization process envisaged by the presidents, meaning Trump and Putin. The U.S. State Department categorically refuses to discuss the return of 6 properties that have been confiscated from the Russian Federation and are now being treated as someone else's private property. The American Special Services, which have taken the properties under their protection, are illegally denying access to the Russian ambassador and to Russian diplomats. Similarly, by linking the commencement of meaningful discussions on this matter to a resolution in Ukraine, the U.S. is responding to the suggestion of resuming direct air links, like Aeroflot, which was also told they couldn't fly, which Washington suspended following the commencement of the special military operation. And the interviewer then says, is there any hope that this dialogue will get off the ground? Because nothing's been done on it at all. And he says, we are not giving up. We are urging the State Department negotiating team not to narrow the dialogue on these irritants, contrary to the task set by the presidents. It is important not to limit ourselves to visa issues and day-to-day practicalities of ensuring the functioning of diplomatic missions, but rather to focus on restoring normality more broadly. The first step is to return to December 2016, when Barack Obama, frustrated by Hillary Clinton's defeat in the presidential election, initiated the Russian-American diplomatic war. And that's true, he really did. We are now painfully dealing with the consequences of this. We will continue to work persistently in this direction. So talk about, a sore loser. Remember when Obama went and trashed all the Russian consulates and terminated a whole bunch of diplomatic channels and positions because Hillary Clinton lost. And it was all due to Russiagate, remember? And it was all due to Russia. So he took a very big approach to beat up on Russia in that way. So, did you hear about this one? I found this one very weird, and it says this came out earlier today, and then maybe I can get JR to take some interest in this for his show also. 2 U.S. men have been indicted for allegedly plotting an armed operation to take control of a Caribbean island, kill its male population, and enslave the women and children. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Texas, Gavin Wiesenberg, 21, and Tamar Thomas, 20, both from the Dallas area, conspired to recruit and lead an unlawful expeditionary force to Isla de la Gonave, a tropical island with 100,000 residents that is part of the Republic of Haiti. The plan, discussed between August 24 and July of 25, aimed to stage a coup for the purpose of carrying out their rape fantasies. Wiesenberg and Thomas intended to murder all of the men on the island so they could turn all of the women and children into their sex slaves, prosecutors said on Thursday, adding that both men have been charged with conspiracy to murder, maim, or kidnap in a foreign country and produce child pornography. Is that crazy or what? I'm going to see if I can do this. Let's see. Hello? Let's see. Hold on a second. Take me a minute.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you quite well. Thank you.
Cool. I want to make sure I can hear you well. Say something.
Hello.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry. I'm remote, so Dobry dien, как dela? That
Yeah.
means
Hello. How are
good
you?
day. How are you? Yep.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Dobry den. Yeah. You taught me that. Actually, you inspired me to learn that. So anyway, so Hill and Billary, they've rejected the subpoena from the House Ethics Committee or something. And Steve Bannon and the other guy, the good-looking older fella, Peter Navarro.
I can't remember his name. Yes. There you go.
Peter Navarro, they went to jail because they refused a subpoena. And where is Hill and Billary? They're still sitting in their blood-sucking satanic villa, wherever it might be. I don't know, bro. But there are devils out there in this world. You know there are, don't you?
I do. Yep.
There are devils.
Yep. Candace Owens said that Macron ordered her assassination.
Well, and Charlie Kirk.
Did you hear that?
No, I didn't. I try to dip in and out. I tried not to get too overly involved because it drives me fucking batty, bro. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you and JR and Josh and Paulie and all you guys that do your show. I don't know how you stick with it because it drives me fucking crazy to try to keep up with all this shit.
Well, I almost didn't do one tonight because I was in a long meeting with a bunch of lawyers today in St. Louis, and then I didn't leave that meeting until about 3:30, and I was, I'm on the road to Florida, and so I don't know if you heard the part where I said I'm coming to you live from a Staybridge Suites parking lot in Memphis, Tennessee.
I didn't hear
Instead
that,
of
but it sounds like that's where you're coming to me from. Honestly, it does. So,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry it sounds bad, but...
No, it doesn't sound bad. It sounds like you're the man on the road, bro. It sounds like you're one of the last fucking true patriots. I know, you don't think that Trump is the greatest guy in the world or anything like that. And I don't
think he's the worst, not remotely. He's doing a good job.
No.
It just...
Yeah,
I'm not always for him.
You're the classic moderate. And, without moderates, we'd be doomed. But the problem is we don't have many moderates like you, Sam. We need more moderates like you. But those old baby boomers, those Zoomers and boomers, they are not moderates, man. They are blue-haired, pink-haired, yellow-haired, leftist, radical, brainwashed Fs, dude. That's the battle that we're fighting right now. And you know what the percentage of them to, like guys like you and me, and I'm not calling you like me. Far be it from me to consider you like me, because I'm going to say you and me are probably more different than we are alike. But here's the thing. Those leftists, freaks, disillusioned, bamboozled, incomprehensible dumbbells, man. There's like 3% of them, maybe 1.5%, not many. And the big mainstream news and media puts it all out there like there's a big fight to fight. There is no big fight to fight, man. I'm going to tell you, even from your position as a moderate, going to my position as a very, I don't know what you want to call me, a right-wing radical, maybe a conspiracy theorist. I don't know, somebody that doesn't.
Yeah, but I'm a conspiracy theorist too. I believe in my share of conspiracy. You know what I mean? It's
I do. Why I continue to tune
I
into
get
them.
it.
That's why. Yeah, I called in tonight, and I'm glad. I think you're going on like in the mornings or something soon, aren't you?
Yeah, this week I'm gonna try to do my regular all the way through Thursday. And the only issue is next Sunday I am not leaving Florida until I got to take my wife to the airport in Tampa, and then I'll be driving back from there. But her flight's not till like, I don't know, noon or something. So I can't drop her off till 10. Otherwise, I'd leave real early in the morning.
It's just a one-time thing.
Well, no. I'm doing 7:30 to 9 or 7 to 8:30 with music after the 8:30 to 9 part, so it doesn't interfere with anybody who starts at 9. I haven't decided yet, but it's probably 7:30 to 9 every morning. Thanks for bringing that up, by the way. I meant to mention it, and but this will be what is that day? December the 1st. So, but Monday I might be doing it on the road because the 30th is Sunday, I think.
Well, that's great. I'd love to hear you at 7:30 in the morning. Then a multitude of other options out there. Sports radio or mainstream media radio or anything. I'd love to hear you in the morning. That's great. I love that. I love the thought.
Yeah, it's for me it works out a little bit easier because what I've ended up doing is it was easy when I did it all out of the house, but going to studio, going to the office, going to all these places has made it a little bit less bearable. You know what I mean? But if I go to the studio first and then head to the office from there, life is going to be fantastic. That's an easy thing.
Are you in a hotel room?
It's a little bit. I mean, nobody cares about that on the radio, but there you go.
No. Are you offsite? Are you in a hotel room or? It doesn't sound like you're
right now. I'm actually sitting in the front of my truck, and because I'm gonna keep on trucking. I like driving at night, and I would be driving right now, but for two things: one, I got a diesel, and it's a little bit loud, and two, I was afraid that if I was driving, the internet on my tablet wouldn't hold out. And it would, if you're moving, and it would cut me off in the middle. So I was going to pull over like in a rest area or somewhere, but I'm in Memphis, and so here you don't have to worry about the internet.
You have a diesel. I would have pictured you for like a Tesla guy, or a environmentally friendly car. But you have a diesel.
Do you know I had a diesel? Do you remember when Volkswagen got busted for the diesel program? I bought a diesel. Yeah, that's right. Where they did that, it was a class action. I bought a diesel it cost me $36,000 in 2013. I bought a TDI Passat SEL, and it got 48 miles to the gallon, and it was a diesel, and it was a fantastic car. A 4-door car, sedan, very nice, and I loved that car. And then I put in, so that was 2013. By 2016, I had put 110,000 miles on that thing in 3 years. Okay.
Wow.
Yep, 110,000 miles on that car, and then that is when they had the lawsuit that said that they would buy back your car. I still had like a year's worth of payments left on the thing. I bought it on a 4-year payout, and I put a decent amount down, and but the payment was nothing, and it was I got back $21,000, and they paid off the note that I had left, which was like $6,000. It was some small amount of money that I still owed on it, but they paid it all off and gave me $21,000 to buy a new car. They tried to get me to buy a new Volkswagen. I didn't, but that's what they tried to get me to do.
Wasn't that what it was?
Yes, whatever it was. No, not this one. This was settlement of the Volkswagen lawsuit because they lied about the diesel. And they lied about the emissions. And so Volkswagen in a class action got ordered to buy back all of these cars. And they had to buy back mine, even though it was 100,000 miles plus, and it still owed some money. It was a cool car. I loved it. It still would have gone for another 200, easy. And a diesel goes forever, Yep. Sorry to go into a story that had nothing to do with it, but
I think it's great. So that's what I'm in search of. I've got a 1993 Ford F-150. It's got 280,000. and it keeps up. I got a throw-out bearing going out on it right now, but that's going to cost me, I don't know, maybe $1,000. And then I have got the you know what the property tax on that truck is? $8.
I don't know, but I hate property tax. I hate property tax. I think that's the biggest load of crap I ever heard. And if you license them in Florida, there's no such animal. You don't pay property tax.
My point is, I keep my my carbon footprint to the lowest possible least common denominator. So it costs them more. It literally costs them more to send out my fucking bill than it does to what I owe them. I mean, that's the case. That is the plan. That's a true thing. I mean, I can show you the. But anyway, I'm glad you're on tonight. Thanks for letting me call in, and I'll look forward to seeing your morning show next week.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to the morning show, and I hope I like it as much as I have the evening. But it's either that or build a mini studio in my house again, and not have to go to the studio, But I like going to the studio. It sounds better. It's it's easier to take calls. I mean, you calling in, it's been a little bit. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to do it, and I'm glad I was, and because I'm on a remote program called Discord to get into to my voice so it comes across fairly clean, and then you're on the telephone, and it used to be that if you were on one or the other, you couldn't do both, and it was a pain in the rear end, and I was afraid I'd screw it all up because I haven't been remote in a while. And but I think it came out pretty good. I very much appreciate your call in tonight, and thanks for calling. And you have a good evening. Happy Sunday to you.
You too. Good night. Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh yes, and you as well.
Thanks, bro. Bye.
Bye. And there he goes. If I can hang him up, I don't know how to do it. Or it's hard to grab these things on. It's a small screen anyway, and I don't have a mouse. I have a new computer that I was gonna get into use, but I'm doing so right now. I'm doing the show. The beauty of the studio, just so you know, is you have computers, screens all around you, and you have JR's got TVs everywhere, and so the computer screens are accessible, and you can do a little bit of research and a little bit of follow up on what you're trying to discuss. And you can even do, if you are looking for something, you can do a little bit of research while you're there or follow your stuff online. But if you're in your truck in a Staybridge Suites parking lot in Memphis, Tennessee, using your Samsung tablet, whatever this is called, Samsung something tablet, it's an Android tablet, and your Samsung S24 Plus Pro Edition phone, it's a little more difficult. So you're on the one, and you can only log into one screen at a time, or you got to cut off the old one, which makes it a little more on the difficult side. So I appreciate the caller. I appreciate the discussion on it. I wanted to get to, because I wanted to talk about this, and I know JR will probably talk about this tomorrow, and I've mentioned him too many times tonight, but I'm sure he will talk about this. Candace Owens says that Macron has ordered her assassination. Let's see. So she's the one, of course, when she claimed that Brigitte Macron is a transgender woman, says that Macron has authorized her assassination. She's currently in a legal dispute with the family Macron after releasing her series Becoming Brigitte earlier this year. And in the podcast, she alleged that the First Lady of France was born a male and is related to French President by blood. It also claimed that Emmanuel Macron was involved in CIA mind control programs. Now, I've meant to go back and listen to that, and I saw parts of it, but never got there. But in response, the Macrons filed a defamation suit. They accused her of spreading outlandish, defamatory, and far-fetched fictions. In a post on X on Friday, Owens said she had been contacted by a high-ranking employee of the French government who claimed that the Macrons have executed upon and paid for her assassination and the assassination of French journalist Javier Pressard. Pressard is the former editor of Faits des Documents, previously promoted a theory alleging that Brigitte Macron, born Trognon, had died young and that her older brother, Jean-Michel Trognon, later had a sex change and assumed her identity before marrying Emmanuel Macron. More specifically, here's what she wrote, that the green light was given to a small team in the National Gendarmerie Intervention Group. I am told there is one Israeli on the assassination squad, and the plans were formalized for her assassination. She said, "This is deadly serious. The head of state of France apparently wants us both dead and has authorized professional units to carry this out." The identity controversy surrounding the French First Lady first surfaced in 2021 when someone named Amandine Roy and journalist Natasha Ray claimed that she had been born a man. A French court ruled in Macron's favor in 2024 before an appeals court overturned that verdict in July of 2025. So I'm wondering where this is. I wanted to share with you the Trumpster's comments on Zelensky fighting his little heart out. If you didn't remember this is pretty damn funny. The U.S. president, has said Ukraine's Zelensky, the Z-Man or the Green Goblin, who's now wearing black, so I suppose when you change him to the Black Goblin, he can continue to fight his little heart out should he refuse the proposed peace plan. Washington presented Kiev this week a draft proposal to end the conflict and pressed the Ukrainian leadership to accept it by Thursday. Trump made this remark while speaking to reporters outside the White House Saturday. And the president asked what would happen. He was asked what would happen if Zelensky refused. Then he can continue to fight his little heart out. Yes. Trump's latest statement echoes remarks he made on Friday when he said that Zelensky is going to have to accept something at some point. Trump warned that Ukraine is headed into a cold winter. That's what I've been saying forever. While its energy infrastructure sites have been under attack, to put it mildly, according to Trump. He will have to like the plan, and if he does not like it, then, they should just keep fighting, I guess, said Trump. According to the media, Washington threatened Kiev with cutting off military aid and U.S. intelligence sharing if it rejects the peace proposal. Earlier this year, the U.S. used the same leverage to press Ukraine into accepting Trump's rare earths deal. So that deal is still sitting out there, but we haven't heard anything about it, have we? You know that Vance says that Ukrainian victory over Russia is a fantasy. There are separate stories on that. He said that more than on one occasion. But now all the European people, the backers, this coalition of the willing idiots, are wanting to rewrite the plan. And let's see. The EU nations are trying to buy Ukraine more time. and they want to postpone the deadline on Thursday. So the approach being taken by these backers tries to rewrite much of the proposed document and conceal the changes as constructive updates, says sources familiar with this effort. Washington has signaled it is not ready to drastically amend the peace plan that has been drafted. Ukraine's Zelensky on Friday. Now this, and I remember this, but I haven't spoken to you since Thursday night. And what he said was on Friday that Ukraine is facing one of the most difficult moments in our history. He means Ukraine's, and facing a choice between accepting 28 difficult points or risking losing its key partner. And according to media experts, Washington threatened to cut Kyiv off. Asked about Zelensky's take on the situation, said Trump, Zelensky is going to have to accept something. Putin confirmed that Moscow has received the plan, but that the proposal has not been discussed in detail yet. And the draft proposal could become the basis of a final peace settlement, he stated. But what they're doing is Europe is calling this a ceasefire, and that's not going to work. And trying to create buffer zones, and that's not going to work, at least not without giving up all of Donetsk, all of Lugansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, and those four oblasts, and recognizing Crimea. Now, the plan says that they're going to recognize Crimea and the Donbass, which is Donetsk and Lugansk, but not Zaporizhia and Kherson, that those can be negotiated later, which is why a lot of people think this is just a glorified attempt at a ceasefire. And so there's been talks that that Russia won't ever accept this anyway, because it is just a ceasefire. I'm not positive if it's going to get anywhere. I think that there was talk this past week, and in fact, I saw in the news this morning on another story that I read that said that the Verkhovna Rada. Now, the Verkhovna Rada is the legislature of Ukraine. That the Verkhovna Rada has ceased operation, and that without them, Zelensky has no power. Okay, that he cannot operate without the Verkhovna Rada. But a lot of people in the Verkhovna Rada, according to this story that I read, and I forget where it was like Politico or something like that, but it said that the Verkhovna Rada has said that the Zelensky and his corrupt team, they don't have authority anymore, and the efforts are being taken with the U.S., three-letter agencies and stuff like that, that they're creating another government to step into place. And there's some I'm not saying I know this. I'm just saying it was an interesting take on a story that I read this morning. And then I heard talk about it in another one of the political people that I listen to on a regular basis. And it said that since the Verkhovna Rada is shut down, basically, they say they're not going to operate anymore, and the efforts are being taken by these three-letter agencies and people in the know in Ukraine to create another government. And you can call it a shadow government, you can call it whatever you want. But the way I see it is it would be a replacement government. And so there's a Zelensky's one of his advisors, a very high up in this advisor, is actually at the conference. Ushakov, I think it is, but I can't remember for sure if that's his name. But I think it's Ushakov, who is who is there, but I could be mistaken. That no, it's Andre Yermak. That Yermak is going to be going to talk with Rubio and with the team in Geneva, and that he'll be the one negotiating. There's also talk that Zelensky, who is the former commander, well, the general in charge of the armed forces, that Zelensky kicked out in early 2024 and replaced with Siersky, who's the guy that's losing all over the battlefield now and sending all these people to the meat grinder deaths that they're going to. But Zelensky he was favored by the U.S., especially under the Biden era. And he was sent to Britain as Ukraine's ambassador to Britain. And so that kept him there. And he's been making friends in Britain, and that people seem to think that he's going to be the next shoe-in for who gets to be, when they boot out the Z monster and kick him out, they'll bring in Zelensky instead. And Zelensky doesn't like Siersky. So watch for this in the coming months, especially if Trump can get this done in his first year. He might take the effort to get rid of Zelensky. Remember, the 28-point peace plan includes elections within 90 days. And somebody has to get an election in 90 days because the Russians say, and so do a lot of other people, that old Zelensky is illegitimate and that he can't sign any peace proposal because it's not enforceable, because he had to have elections in May of 2024, and he never did. And so therefore, he's completely illegitimate now. He's a year and a half past his date of expiration, and he's rotten to the core, which all of this corruption is showing. And one of the key impacts of this 28-point peace plan, one of the key impacts of this is that nobody is investigated. Nobody is charged with a crime. And I mean on either side. And that includes all of the war profiteers in Ukraine that have milked the U.S. money, the European money, in fact, the Ukrainian money. They have sucked it all dry. They've bled Ukraine dry. They've killed off, 1.5 million men. They've lost 10 to 15 million people who migrated out of the country, and they've destroyed much of their industrial and resources base, and they're in a world of hurt. And so how do you get this fixed? You let everybody who got rich and broke the law and stole all this money, you let them all off the hook in a treaty, and you go, no, and Zelensky can move. If you believe in the fact that he bought all these houses, there have been at least 3 stories, probably more like 5 or 6, that say his wife, Zelenska, depending, because in Russian you end the women's name with an A and the men's is not, and so him being Zelensky, her would be Zelenska, Zelenskaya, and he's Zelensky, and so at any rate, his wife has allegedly bought a villa in France, something in Paris, something on an island in the Mediterranean or Caribbean, I don't remember which, and a small castle in England. Now, a lot of people say that's all fake news and you don't believe it, but they've certainly pocketed a butt ton of money, as have the Zelenskys, both of them, and so has everybody else associated with this war. When Trump talks about putting $100 billion in a fund and then matching it with European funds and have 200 billion to rebuild Ukraine, it makes me want to get a crew of people and go over there to, but I don't know that I'd be allowed because some Ukrainian had knifed me in the street because I haven't just blindly pumped, pro-Ukrainian stuff and or anti-Russian stuff. And so, it's unfortunate that I'd be afraid to go there because Ukraine is a beautiful country, I hear. And the people are certainly just as fantastic as the Russians in most cases, although there are some some scary parts to that I'd prefer not to be a part of. And but I would like to go over there. I'd like to participate in that stuff. I think it'd be fun, if nothing else, to go report from there and maybe do some shows from there. I'm all for that, and I'd love to do it. So I may try to make that effort whenever it gets done. But I think I would rather go over to the Russian side, which will be in the Donbass, Donetsk, Lugansk, maybe Zaporizhia, maybe Crimea, which would be fantastic. So I also heard a whole bunch today about Turkey pushing hard for this 28-point plan because they want to stop the war before Russia takes Odessa, because then Russia and not any NATO countries except Bulgaria would be in any way, or Romania down there. No, I can't remember which one touched the Black Sea below Odessa. Sorry about my geography lessons being off today. I think it's Bulgaria, but I don't remember. And but if Russia takes Odessa, Ukraine would be cut off from the Black Sea, and allegedly Turkey doesn't want that because then Russia would be in charge of literally the entire northern half of the Black Sea and would control all shipping into and out of there, and that a lot of people would not be in favor of, according to certain commentators in the last couple of days that I've been listening to. And it does make sense that Turkey would want that. And let's see. Where did we go? Andre Yermak, I was talking to you about him on the graft scandal. Andre Yermak is the omnipotent chief of staff, has been implicated as well in the 100 million graft scheme. And this 53-year-old is now in the crosshairs of this extortion probe, and he is described as Ukraine's real power broker with long-standing ties to Zelensky. And he was a former entertainment lawyer and film producer. He was acquainted with Zelensky when he was on Ukrainian TV, and he worked on Zelensky's election team. Following Zelensky's election, Yermak joined the administration as an entertainment lawyer. I'm sure he's qualified. He became the presidential aide for foreign policy and acted as Kiev's representative in informal diplomatic endeavors. And is he really the true leader of Ukraine? Nobody knows, but a lot of people say he is, and he's the real power behind the scene. And now NABU, that anti-corruption bureau, is claiming that he is involved. So the alleged involvement of Yermak in the Energo-Atom graft affair, it means that many in Ukraine have demanded his dismissal. Zelensky is said to have refused to dismiss him when the issue was brought up during closed-door meetings with MPs from his party on Thursday. According to opposition MP Alexei Goncharenko, the dissenting member of Servant of the People, issued an ultimatum to Zelensky and demanded Yermak's dismissal
or promise to quit the party, which nobody has done so far. All right, we're going to see if I can figure this out, how to exit the show properly, if I can do that, and make sure that I get there. This has been International Flavor on Damn Radio. Very glad to have you. I will join you tomorrow night as well, I believe. I hope you enjoy us. Check out my shows at internationalflavor.com.